They told me I wasn't on the list. Imagine that for a moment. Walking into a place where your very blood and history are tied, where your family name is etched into the fabric of every memory, and yet being stopped cold at the door, treated like some outsider, a stranger. That was me, standing outside the gilded entrance to my own brother's ceremony. The air was crisp, the kind of night that makes the lights shimmer more brightly against the polished glass of the hall. But inside those walls, laughter and applause rose in waves I wasn't invited to join. A security guard, doing his job, looked at me with polite indifference and said, "Sorry, sir, you're not on the list." Not on the list? My brother's blood runs in my veins, and yet here I was, treated like some unworthy guest. For a moment, anger bubbled up, followed quickly by something sharper, pain. The memories of being overlooked, ignored, cast aside in favor of others, surged back. It wasn't the first time I'd felt invisible in my own family, but tonight, the sting cut deeper, because it wasn't just a birthday or a holiday gathering, it was his ceremony, his moment of honor, the kind that families talk about for generations. And I wasn't supposed to be part of it. I wanted to turn away, to disappear into the night, to let the world move on without me, but something inside whispered that this night wasn't like the others. Something told me that walking away would mean more than missing a celebration. It would mean surrendering the last thread that tied me to my brother. And so I stood there, watching guests in glittering attire walk past me, some giving me sympathetic glances, others barely noticing at all. My chest felt heavy, my heart pounding not with jealousy, but with a gnawing ache of being excluded. Have you ever felt that? Like you're shouting into a room full of people, and no one hears you, no one sees you? That was me. And yet, dear listener, I need you to stay with me through this story, because what happened next, when my brother turned, locked eyes with me across the hall, and broke every expectation, would change everything. This isn't just about family rivalry. It's about identity, about truth, about the kind of recognition that cannot be bought, cannot be written on a guest list, but must be earned. And before I take you deeper, before the reveal that silenced the entire room, I'll ask you this. If stories like this move you, if you believe that sometimes the most powerful voices rise from the most unexpected corners, then I invite you to subscribe right now. Subscribe, because what I'm about to share isn't just a story. It's a reminder that sometimes the people left out in the cold are the very ones carrying the fire the world needs to see. The guard shifted uncomfortably, as if he could sense the storm inside me, though he didn't know its cause. His eyes flicked down at the clipboard in his hand, names neatly typed in bold black ink, and he shook his head once more, final and unyielding. I remember thinking how strange it was that a list on paper had more power than blood, more authority than memories of running through fields as children, of whispered secrets shared in the dark, of promises made between brothers when the world seemed cruel. That clipboard, in that moment, was a wall taller than any fortress. And yet beyond that wall, I caught sight of the celebration in fragments, the gleam of polished floors, the sound of a live orchestra tuning their strings, the murmur of proud voices lifting my brother's name as though it were already carved into history. He was the golden one, the son everyone looked to, the one who carried himself with a kind of confidence I never seemed to possess. And though I loved him, though I admired his rise, there was always that shadow, always that unspoken truth that I had been the one sent away, while he was the one brought close. I stepped aside, pretending to check my phone. As couples in gowns and tuxedos swept past me, some brushing me with the faintest perfume, others casting me curious glances. Did they know who I was? Did they wonder why I stood here in the cold, rather than inside basking in the light? My hands clenched at my sides. I thought of the years when I had been far from home, in places where lists didn't matter, where titles and invitations meant nothing, where survival was the only measure of worth. I thought of the ships I'd stood upon, waves crashing like hammers against steel, the endless expanse of ocean surrounding me in every direction, the men and women under my command who looked to me not as an outsider, not as a forgotten brother, but as the one who would see them through the storm. They had called me many things out there, leader, commander, even savior on the darkest nights, but never unworthy, never not on the list. Yet here, among those who should have known me best, I was reduced to nothing more than a name missing from paper. Minutes dragged, though each felt like an hour. I could hear applause from within, loud and rising, followed by the muffled sound of a speech beginning. My brother's voice. It carried with it the same strength I remembered, commanding, assured, the kind that could silence a room and ignite admiration. But what struck me wasn't just his words, it was the realization that, even without me, his ceremony went on. The world didn't stop because I stood outside. The spotlight shone just as bright. And that hurt. Have you ever been struck with the knowledge that life moves forward without you, that celebrations carry on even when you're excluded, that the absence of your presence is not even noticed? It's a heavy thing, a truth that can sink into your bones. I lowered my gaze, willing myself not to crumble. But deep inside, I also knew something else, that fate has a way of shifting in an instant. Sometimes the moment you feel most invisible is the moment the world is preparing to turn and see you in full light. I just didn't know yet how that turn would come. The hall grew quieter than I had ever heard it, and in that silence, my brother's words echoed like thunder. "Welcome, Admiral Hayes." For a fleeting second, I thought I had misheard him, that perhaps the laughter, the clinking glasses, and the music from the string quartet had blurred my senses. But then all eyes shifted to me, every guest, every family member, every distant relative who had whispered my name with disdain over the years, all now staring with wide eyes, stunned expressions, and mouths slightly agape. My brother had always been the golden child, the one my parents proudly spoke about at every family gathering, while I was painted as the black sheep, the one who never measured up. To suddenly hear him announce my title with respect, reverence even, was like an earthquake rattling the very foundations of their perception. I could see the astonishment on my father's face, a man who once told me that I would never amount to anything because I didn't follow the path he laid out. My mother, whose eyes often glossed over me at events, was blinking rapidly as though trying to reconcile the son she thought she knew with the man standing before her. My brother walked toward me, his steps deliberate, his smile broadening as he extended his arms for an embrace. For years we had been estranged, our relationship strained by competition, jealousy, and misunderstandings. Yet, in that moment, as he hugged me tightly and repeated the words for all to hear, "This is my brother, Admiral Hayes," a weight I didn't realize I had been carrying began to lift. The room erupted in whispers, then in applause, then in gasps of admiration as people realized that the man they had overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated had risen to a position of honor few ever dream of. It wasn't just a title, it was validation, it was respect, and it was proof that the sacrifices I had endured in silence were not in vain. My mind flashed back to the endless nights on ships, the storms weathered at sea, the battles fought not just with enemies, but with doubt and despair, the sleepless hours of command where every decision meant lives in the balance. All of that had led here to this moment. And now, for the first time, my story was being acknowledged in the one place I thought I would forever remain invisible. The applause didn't fade quickly, it rolled across the room like a wave, building and crashing as guests rose to their feet in stunned respect. For a long moment, I just stood there, caught between disbelief and a profound sense of vindication, my brother's arm still around my shoulders as though to anchor me in this unfamiliar storm of admiration. The same relatives who once whispered that I was a failure were now craning their necks, clutching their pearls, and mouthing to one another the word Admiral as if it were too heavy to carry in their own voices. My father, who had never so much as shaken my hand in public, now shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his stern face betraying cracks of shame, pride, and regret all at once. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her lips trembling with words she had swallowed for decades. I could see the younger cousins, who once laughed at my modest suits and the quiet way I avoided the spotlight, now staring at me as though I were some mythical figure, someone who had walked through fire and emerged cloaked in honor. The irony wasn't lost on me. All those years of being excluded from family lists, forgotten in invitations, and pushed aside at ceremonies had forged me into the very person they now couldn't stop applauding. The claps turned to cheers, then to chants of my name, and I saw in their faces not just shock, but a dawning realization: they had misjudged me. The hall itself seemed to transform. The chandeliers sparkled brighter, the music stilled in reverence, and the air carried the weight of history being rewritten before their eyes. My brother lifted my hand high like a victor returning from war, and as I looked out at the crowd, I knew this was no longer just a family ceremony. It had become a moment of reckoning, a moment where truth cut through years of false narratives. And while they all stood in awe, I felt a deep calm settle in my chest, the calm of a man who no longer needed their approval but had finally, undeniably, earned their respect. The room eventually fell into a hush again, the kind of silence that trembles under the weight of unspoken words, waiting for someone to break it. My brother's hand lowered, and all eyes shifted toward me, as though they expected a grand speech, a declaration, or perhaps even a rebuke. For years, they had overlooked me, dismissed me, and written me out of their narratives, yet now they hung on my every breath. I looked across the hall, the long tables adorned with crystal glasses, the chandeliers still swaying faintly, the faces frozen in awe, and I felt an old ache rise inside me, the ache of countless family gatherings where my name was barely mentioned, my efforts erased, my presence tolerated but never celebrated. And now here I was, Admiral Hayes, standing before them not as the forgotten one, not as the black sheep, but as the man who carried the weight of oceans, men, and honor on his shoulders. I could have chosen anger. I could have chosen to let bitterness spill into that room like a storm. But instead, I chose something else. I took a deep breath, let it roll out slow, and then I smiled. All my life, I began, my voice steady but thick with memory, I was told I didn't measure up. Tonight, I came expecting nothing more than another quiet place in the shadows, another reminder of how easily family forgets. But my brother, I turned and placed a hand on his shoulder, chose differently. He chose to remind you all of something that goes beyond titles, beyond uniforms, beyond ceremonies. He chose to remind you that respect should never be earned only through rank, but through the integrity of one's soul. I let the words hang, saw them strike deep into the hearts of those who once dismissed me, and then continued, softer now, almost a whisper: I do not need your applause. I do not need your validation. For I have carried storms in silence, and the ocean has already tested me in ways you never will. But if tonight means anything, let it mean this: never underestimate the quiet ones you ignore, for one day, they may stand before you not asking for your approval, but offering you forgiveness. And with that, I lifted my glass, not in triumph but in grace, and the hall erupted again, this time not with forced admiration, but with something purer, something closer to reverence. My brother's eyes glistened, and for the first time in my life, I knew I had finally stepped out of the shadows, not because they invited me to, but because I had created my own light, and they had no choice but to see it.